Welcome to the Southern Report. Thank you so much for lending me the privilege of your time. It's much appreciated. One of the wonderful things about doing this is that you can bring on dear friends as much as you can when they're available. And I'm very pleased to say that Mr. Peter Baum, who writes for Blitz, he will tell us what his role is within that incredible media operation, and we will discuss various events that are going on in the world that are in regard to Israel and what has been happening on this side of the pond within the UK for my dear American viewers. Peter, lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining me and for your time. You are looking absolutely dapper and extremely well, my friend. So thank you.
Thanks, Mark. An absolute pleasure to be on your program. Absolute pleasure.
Brilliant. So, Blitz, can you tell us about it? Can you just remind us of your role within it? I was delighted to see your official press pass the other day. So I congratulate you on that. That was brilliant.
Thank you, Mark. Blitz is quite an amazing and unique publication. It's published from Bangladesh, has a printed circulation of something like £75,000, an online circulation of getting towards a million, and it's circulated in Urdu, Arabic, and English. And I think, Mark, I'm pretty sure about this, that I hold the unique position of being the only Jewish person who is the foreign affairs editor of an Islamic publication. I don't know.
Wow.
I've been around this game a long, long time, and although I know of Jewish people that have written occasionally for Islamic publications, I think I'm the only Jew alive who holds that title. And the publisher is a rather remarkable chap. His name is Saladin Chowdhury, and he spent 7 years in a Bangladeshi prison. And believe me, Mark, the prisons in Bangladesh are not like the prisons in any Western democracy. He spent 7 years in prison under the regime before last, two regimes before last, simply for wanting to establish dialogue with the Jewish state of Israel. And for that, he was jailed for 7 years. Even with this change of government in Bangladesh, which is very virulently Islamic, I'm still allowed to write my articles and take on that role. And he's telling me, although life is less comfortable now than it was under the previous regime of Mrs. Asina, he is still given some degree of flexibility, but has to be very careful. So I hold that position, and the reason I chose Blitz to establish myself, if you like, is because I did not want to preach to the converted. There's no point writing, in my opinion, for articles like at the Jerusalem Post or pro-Israel publications, because the readership is on our side. We know that. It's getting to those people who are anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, anti the Jewish state, that I really wanted to get my message across. And the fact that I've been writing for them for 7 years now, and I'm told, I don't think he's just boosting my ego here, I'm told that he can charge more for advertising space next to my articles than any other of his his writers or journalists or contributors. Gives you an idea of how, I wouldn't say influential, but how interested the other parties are. And one last thing, I know I'm rambling a bit, Mark, but when I first started, the feedback was horrific to me personally. You can imagine the kind of rabid, anti-Semitic comments that we're making. As time's progressed, I honestly believe that I've reached a demographic out there that is willing to listen, to understand, And all I can say, Mark, now is that the current level of death threats that I receive now was on a spiraling downward trajectory from that when I first started writing for Blitz. So I think I'm hitting a note within a previously um, demographic that was violently opposed to Israel, that at least now is willing to listen. And in some cases, quite a few actually, I've changed minds.
Well, that is such good news. I'm sorry that we have to measure the measure of our success by the amount of death threats that are actually declining. But you will certainly be continue to be in my prayers on that, and I urge everyone else. We may joke about it, but it's it's real. I know these things are verbal at times, or keyboard warriors, but no, thank you, Peter, for explaining that, and thank you for all you do. And I ask people to go and find these articles, and I will put a link to Blitz below. We're discussing getting that. That's really really important. Peter, asking a huge question: where are we, in your opinion, in regard to the propaganda war? In regard to this media war that we are, a number of us are trying to do whatever we can to push against. What's your opinion?
Yeah, that even before October the 7th,
Hmm.
Israel, Zionism, the Jewish state, was way behind the curve in pushing back on the rabid, anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish state, anti-Zionist um, media. Sorry, Mark, I'm just going to turn this off.
Don't worry.
Sorry,
Don't
Mark.
worry.
My apologies. Um, was way behind the curve in the public relations war. Since October the 7th, that trajectory has exacerbated. And it's a huge struggle for people like ourselves to fight back, to present in a rational way, and to try and change minds and get our message across. The weight is overpowering, and more so in Western democracies than ever before. It's overpowering, and it becomes depressing, and it becomes upsetting, frustrating, annoying, whatever words you want to put on it. And I just feel that we are getting trodden on more and more and more. I don't see this changing in the near term, but I do see it changing in, let's say, the medium to long term. But for the moment, I think guys like yourself and myself are going to be fighting against an opposition that is too overwhelming. Um, Whether it's social media, mainstream media, especially on Sky News, even now ITV and Channel 4, the BBC, aware of its previous um, bias against Israel, is probably being more careful than most media outlets. But the US media channels such as CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC are still as virulently anti-Semitic. Sorry, I'm not going to say anti-Semitic. I'm going to say anti-Jewish state. And of course, Al Jazeera, which has a huge outreach to the Muslim world, the Arab world, Africa, in Europe, and all globally now, is really nothing more than our mouthpiece of the government of Qatar. Bear in
Yeah.
mind, I'm not sure
Yeah.
whether if any of your viewers know this, but Al Jazeera is owned by the Qatari Investment Corporation, which is 100% owned by the government of Qatar. It
Absolutely.
is, in effect, the propaganda ministry for the government of Qatar. And when you have an organization with that reach and with that power and seemingly presenting itself in a kind of very diplomatic, political, unbiased manner, it gets to those in our society that don't know too much about the politics, the history, the region, etc. So that has been very, very damaging. But mainstream media, academia, another area which has been violently anti-Jewish state and has its tentacles out in from 5-year-olds through to people doing degrees at the Open University.
Yeah.
It's been, to answer your question, where do we stand? We've lost, or we're losing dramatically, the propaganda war, but I think that's going to last. If I put a time on it, I will say until the government of Israel has a new leader, I think that's the time and the moment when we can start fighting back and possibly gaining ground. As long as Netanyahu's in charge, who's been demonized in the United Nations, in the media, etc., etc., we're on a losing wicket.
Well, when you say the UN, it was extremely good to see Rubio, etc., coming against that female lawyer Albanese. Although she calls herself a lawyer, I don't think she's even.
I don't. She's not qualified,
She's
Mark.
not
From what I
qualified.
understand, I've looked. I've researched and researched. I do not believe she has a
No,
formal legal
no,
qualification.
no. It's a bit like the business secretary of this country, Reynolds, who then says he's a solicitor, but he didn't even
Indeed.
finish that, let alone be qualified to be the business secretary. That is not a side swipe, but what a sort of going down the little rabbit hole. But what it does is people forget that people can do research and go, no, you're not who we say you are. And I just want to raise the fact that what we're dealing with when we see dear Natasha Horsoff of UK Lawyers for Israel going on Piers Morgan and being treated in the way that she was, where not allowed to get in a word in edgeways. He actually swears at her by using the word bullshit at her, etc., etc. Where Natasha really knows her stuff, we have other incidents as well. And I think let's call it out, especially in America, where Candace Owen has revealed who she really is. And also Tucker Carlson, as he's now called. I think Israeli 24 channel had a good expose on that, on wondering where his funding is coming from, leading back to Qatar. You're absolutely right. Let's just remind where the leaders of Hamas, these billionaires on all public money given by various countries, were actually living. Qatar. It's really, in my mind, a lot of mixed messages constantly that we're having to get through to educate people. Peter, look at the streets on our own street where young people are on a pro-Palestinian march. They're holding signs from the river to the sea, and they don't even know what it means. Have you seen those footage even recently?
Yeah. No, indeed. These marches, which incidentally, I think that there was a freedom of, I think GB News did a freedom of information request, and these marches to date have cost the taxpayers
Yes.
something like £75 million.
Yeah.
Now, the right to protest is fundamental to our society. No one would disagree with that. But let's be brutally honest. The vast majority of those people who are protesting, they need a cause to which to virtual signal. And it just so happens kicking the Jewish state of Israel is their cause. But underlying those who are not fully aware as we said, the history, the politics, the
Yeah.
region, etc.
Yeah.
Underlying that are a core group of hardline paid activists
Mm.
who are continuously stirring racial hatred and demonizing Jews, Zionists, the Jewish state of Israel. And we've seen that these marches facilitating attacks on Jewish people, attacks on Jewish businesses, attacks on organizations that are supposed to be trading with Israel. And this is all this narrative, this false narrative that is being promoted, is now being believed by more and more people as the weeks go past. And the victim of that are Jews living in Western democracies who have been subjected to week after week after week to these far left Islamic funded protests. And I think the authorities, if they are acting, have acted too late. The number of protests from their peak, they used to be weekly, Mark,
Mm. Mm.
after October the 7th. They're now monthly. There were some protests when Palestine action were prescribed, but the numbers, I think, I know someone who regularly attends these protests, pretending to be one of the mob, but
Yeah.
in reality, getting obviously I won't disclose
No,
his or her
absolutely.
name, but I get feedback from him virtually immediately after the process of the march has ended, with his intuitive feel comparing that particular march with the marches that he went on when they first started. And only anecdotal evidence, but he believes it's almost like the economic law of diminishing returns. When these marches and protests first started, they were in their hundreds of thousands and weekly. Now they're in their tens of thousands and monthly, and the focused marches, such as the one supporting Palestine Action or the one supporting the lawyers who have just lost their case, actually, against
Yes.
describing Hamas as being a terrorist group, the numbers attending are definitely on a downward trajectory. Now, of course, one could say, well, look, it's been very hot recently, blah, 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 and that people don't want to go. But I tend to think it's, as I say, I tend to think it's the law of diminishing returns. They're becoming still well supported, but becoming less and less popular. And what I have noticed, Mark, is as a counter for that, the marches being promoted and protests being promoted by, let's call them by British patriots, let's say, against immigration are becoming more frequent and more well attended.
Yes.
So there's a kind of a balance here, which, if you're in our ideological world, is still depressing, but not as depressing as it was immediately post October the 7th.
Well, I'll just put the cards on the table. There's a very big march planned in London on September the 13th, headed up by dear Tommy Robinson. So my prayer is that will be well attended. I think.
Mark, given the feedback that I've had, I think it is going to be hugely attended.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think the Met Police are actually at this moment talking with the authorities to see whether they can ban the march. That comes from another source that I have.
Wow.
That would be interesting. But at the moment, it's been very well advertised, and I think it will be hugely attended if it's allowed to proceed.
Well, if they banned it and millions of people turn up, then what did they do in that particular point? And just to remind us, we now have a prime minister that will gives the knee at a BLM march, etc., etc., gives the knee on behalf of BLM, and we've allowed all that during the COVID nonsense. Yeah, we are in very interesting times. I think, to be fair, Peter, was fair enough to say that we do have to stand up, within within respectfully at the moment within the confines of the law, and make our voices heard. I mean, I'm as fed up with you with seeing the flags, etc., that we've seen from various terrorist groups on the streets of our capital city and elsewhere. Um, Going back to what you were saying about history and speaking the truth, absolutely, I we do that, but it's fascinating when the other side do not want to listen whatsoever. It has confirmed that our schools and our universities on both sides of the pond and elsewhere have become Marxist training camps, as far as I'm concerned, for stupidity. But actually, it's quite frightening. Um, Peter, where it's very interesting when you're saying about, I mean, how vilified, of course, Bibi has been, and is within the press, the lies. One of our biggest challenges, would you agree that we are desperately trying not to be reactionary? We're trying to sit back, learn all the facts before we then come forward again. But the problem is the news cycle doesn't give us that time. What are your thoughts on that?
Um, yeah, I think, Mark, the weight of propaganda, false narrative, ideological anti-Israel bias is so gigantically overwhelming.
Mm,
And in these days of social media, it only takes one piece of false narrative. I'll give you an example. Um, about 3 weeks ago, we saw social media inundated with a report that Israeli troops and their colleagues in the new aid agency, which is
absolutely. Yeah.
helping Gazans with food distribution, fired on Palestinians queuing for food, killing 95. The number started at 30, went up to 40, went up to 50, then it went up to 95. Within less than an hour of that first report being promoted, I think it was by um, an um, an Iranian news broadcaster, it had gone viral, and Sky News, the likes of Alex Crawford from Sky News,
Yeah.
the BBC headline on its online page, every mainstream media channel had been pushing this story. The source came from the Gaza Ministry of Health. Now we know that the Gaza Ministry of Health, that you never find a named official, is basically the Hamas public relations arm.
Mm,
But it had gone viral. Now the Israelis responded too late, in my opinion, by saying they were going to look into the incident, and it proved to be an utterly false
mm,
narrative. But of course, by that time, the damage had been done.
absolutely.
So the Hamas operatives are only too aware that by pushing out a false narrative, it will be picked up upon um, just as being normalized, no fact checking done, and the trusted mainstream media, such as the BBC and CNN, will promote it and put it out. It is we can't do anything about that. I'd like to think actually that um, there it would be an organisation that has the financial muscle to take one of these news organisations through the legal system, as Trump has done in the United States when a couple of news programs vilified him, gave out false narrative, and
Absolutely.
he's won.
Yeah.
And he's won the case.
Yes.
But no one, I don't know of any organisation at the moment. I know of various organisations that challenge the
Mm,
output
mm.
and do it effectively, but don't do it in such a way that there are repercussions which would stop false reporting like this in the future. There are some very good organisations out there, Mark. I'm sure you're aware, like Cameron, like UN Watch, like Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, that are trying their hardest with a cricket bat against a million cricket balls all being bowled to them at the same time. And sometimes but even when they get an apology, Mark, it's nothing more than on a page 37 of the, BBC's website page, and a very tiny thing, we got this wrong, etc. So going back to your first question about where we stand in the propaganda war, yeah, we lost it on a downward trajectory, but I think it could change um, when there is a change of dynamics within the internal Israel political cycle. If I'll give you an example, if Netanyahu, for whatever reason, was resigned and was kicked out, lost his coalition, and we got someone who the Western media could not demonize as much, then I think that would be a turning point, but only to claw back some of the lost ground. We'll never get to the stage, Mark, where people like you and I are in the ascendancy. Never. Those days have gone.
I hear you. I also want to encourage you because there's an incredible syndicate, which is the Jews News Syndicate, which Jonathan Tobin is editor in chief. And when I was in Jerusalem a few weeks ago, I then had the privilege to sit down with Danny Seaman, who has a great program on there called Straight Up. And there are many incredible programs. Caroline Glick, of course, was doing a
Yeah,
great program there. Caroline is now in the government. I think there's a lot of hope with what they are doing. And when Danny is, I think a number of weeks ago, I think I'm right in saying we're doing a program reminding everyone that the Qatarian approach, the whole, opposition approach, where a long game in regard to where they're going to invest in universities and all the rest, and the education system within the West, within the UK, within America, and of course, sadly, as I'm finding out myself with writing something for a presentation at the moment, reminding when we look at universities, of course, Harvard, Columbia, their past not very good in regard to the 30s and who they let in to then speak, and also stopping Jews at that time accessing the university,
yeah,
wanting to like people like Nicholas Murray Butler, who was then chancellor there of the uni, who then wanted to lowered the amount of Jewish students they let in from somewhere like 53 to 23% before the Second World War, and all of this background. There is nothing, it's this whole thing of that repeating, but people are not aware of that at all historically. But no, JNS is really pushing back. And the other thing I have to say, and there's been a number of articles that have come out about the Qatari investment into private schools in this country. We've one or two, um, which is deeply concerning. But people have got to we are opening our eyes to that. There's a huge rabbit trail down there to go and find out. And you're absolutely right. It is the resources, etc., that we all need to push back. On our side, Peter, we're more than willing to debate. I feel on their side there's just abuse, vitriol, and coming up with basically nothing. There is nothing to back up what they're saying, because when they're literally espousing the views of Mein Kampf and the protocols of Zion, and then we've got nowhere to go
Mark,
very often.
that's so true. But what I find equally disheartening is that there aren't too many pro-Israel commentators that are allowed access to the major mainstream platforms.
Yeah, yeah.
More importantly, the ones that are allowed access don't have the depth of knowledge about the history that guys like you and I do. And I'm sometimes extremely disappointed when there's someone who is on the pro-Israel side, let's say, debating with others how poor their knowledge is because about the whole subject matter. And if guys like you and I were on it, I am certain people would stand back and go, "What? I didn't know that. Really? Are you took? Do you know what I mean? It's if because we have spent years of our free time researching this subject in an effort to challenge the false narratives that are being perpetuated second by second by thousands of people on social media, on mainstream media, etc., etc. We have an understanding of how to react to the narrative that's pushed our way, and yet guys like us very rarely get a chance. Very rarely. I think mainstream media are afraid to have us on. That's my feeling, and that's why we're in the background. There's something very interesting going on, Mark, as well. I'm sure you and your people that listen to your podcast, see your podcast, were aware of this remarkable chap on 2CTV. Now, he is hosting an event which I've been invited to. I think it's on August the 9th in London, where it's purely for those of us outside of the mainstream media who have stories to tell, articles to write, of being published, etc., etc. So I'm going to attend that to see what it's like. I've got my press card for the event and my ticket. And I just get a feeling, Mark, going back to what you were saying about how we're faring in the propaganda war, and me being a little bit depressing about it, saying we've lost it. It's events like these that could be the start of the turning point. This 2CTV has now an audience viewing. When I first started watching about, I don't know, 6 months ago, of about 400,000, is now up to 1.2 million.
Maya is doing an incredible job, and of course you're aware of his Iranian heritage
Sure.
as well, and he has been talking into that situation for especially with the 12-day war that has recently gone on. So I think you are right. We'll have a conversation about that, but you are right, and I actually do want to encourage you. The truth is the truth. That's it. Period. And even though at time, even though many people don't want to listen to that, we do have a responsibility, and I know that you take this very seriously. We do have a responsibility to speak it out, and I do understand the frustration and the pain of that, and I understand when people withdraw from social media for a period of time for their own mental health. I absolutely understand that. I think one of the things that I have taken away from my recent visit to Israel, and also afterwards, and some of the people I've met, is is the the absolute support of their nation as civilian, as as Israelis. They met across the political divide. It's like, no, we are standing together here,
No.
and to see them proudly have flag after flag after flag flying in Jerusalem, for argument's sake, is quite incredible. And the fact that I found that inspiring because of what we are also going through as a nation, which is another subject in itself, and we are being told that no, we cannot stand up for believing in our history as a nation. Of course, there are mistakes, but we are being drummed at us to be nationalistic, to actually believe in your nation and what your nation stands for. Its history is wrong, and you mustn't think like that at all. And we all must have open borders. I don't want to necessarily go down there, but what I'm saying is, it was just the stoicism, the fact that recently within the 12-day war and all the ballistic missiles coming off, people talk. I mean, there's sadly people, of course, have died. There's been
No.
buildings bombed, etc., in Tel Aviv, etc., and elsewhere. But the absolute stoicism to get through this, running to the bomb shelters, etc., etc., and this community cohesion, absolutely inspiring. It's embarrassing. I don't necessarily, on one hand, I don't think we're necessarily there, but we need to take encouragement from that, Peter, and to encourage you to keep going and writing and speaking out in the way that you do and have done for a very, very long time. And I'll just end with saying this: the dreadful events of the 7th of October 2023 has meant that for a number of us on our side of the fence have really gone back to, we're going to do more research. I know that I'm one of the embarrassing things about doing this and not plugging certain things in to then make sure that you don't lose power from your computer. That just shows you what at times that we are doing with. So I'm just going to fight and grab that. So I've just done that. But this just, it just, we have been going down history, learning history, and to then come back with facts, even if the other side doesn't want to deal with those facts. But I want to encourage you, and I'm very pleased to hear that you are going to that event. We'll discuss that afterwards. But you're absolutely right. We all do need, at times, we need those events. We need to encourage each other, because we do feel that there's like an asymmetric warfare coming at so many
Absolutely.
different directions, and the propaganda war is the biggest thing I think
Agreed.
we are dealing with. You know, um, Peter, what advice would you give in a situation? Say we meet someone that says, "Look, I'm aware of what's going on here, but I don't fully know facts. Um, I might have this opinion, but an incredible brave person, say, where would I look for historical facts? Where would you point me in the right direction?
Oh,
What would
Mark,
you say to that person?
that is such an interesting question, because there is so much out there that you can um, look to provide the answers that you require. So when it comes to the Israel-Palestinian issue, people always say, well, it began in 1948 with the Nakba. Okay, actually, Mark, we all know that it didn't begin in
Yeah,
1948.
yeah,
That's absurd. So I always I have a little post that I've done that I never get the answers to, because frankly, the pro-Palestinian side don't have answers for them. They come at me with things like the Palestinians are the indigenous people to the population, and the Jews came in 1948, kicked them off their land and colonized them, etc., etc. That's the Zionists. That's the kind of the thematic that runs through the narrative. And of course, we only have to point to real events in history. So I say, well, look, if the Palestinians were the indigenous people of the land they claim to be, what was their what language did they speak in? What was their coinage? Who were their leaders? What wars or battles were recorded against the invasions of the Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, or Romans? Name one monument, one construct, standing or destroyed, constructed by those identifying as indigenous Palestinians. What archaeological evidence has there been of the indigenous Palestinians? Let's find it. Now, the answer that they always come back with, because they can't answer specifics, is, oh, well, DNA tests show that today's Palestinians were part of the Canaanites that lived in Levant. That is I said, but we're talking about the demographic identifying as the Palestinians. And when you, for 15 years I've been sending that post, I've not had one, Mark, not one, out of the, I think, 3 million views it's got, not one person on the other side giving me answers to any of the questions, because there are no answers, Mark. And what staggers me is, in debate after debate on television or on radio, no one from our side comes up with the logical questions that should be answered. Then I ask another question, Mark, going back to how would you advise them? I'd say, well, what is the mother tongue of the Palestinians, given their charters are currently in Arabic? What's the mother tongue? And they say, well, the mother tongue is obviously Arabic. I say, okay, but there was no sign of Arabic being spoken in that geography until it was colonized by Islam. But nevertheless, so what do the Palestinians call themselves in their mother tongue? Because there's no sound for the letter P in Arabic. That is a fact. So they say, well, they must call themselves Philistines. So I say, well, actually, Philistine is the Arab pronunciation of Philistine, who were invaders from Greece, now extinct, and the current definition of Philistine is uncouth, uncultured heathen. That can't be right, surely. And they look at me saying, And then I even hit them, Mark, with their own Quranic teachings. Right. And this is very interesting, Mark, because I know that you'll appreciate this. I know that we, from our own different faiths, are very willing to understand the faith of other people. And in the Quran, Surah 64:11, it says this: no calamity can happen to a people unless Allah wills it so. Now, as you know, the Palestinians are very high, orgasmic on this term, the Nakba. Nakba means calamity. Yeah. So I say to those Palestinians of the Islamic faith, Allah has willed a calamity on you. Why is a calamity after calamity? Why is that? What have the Palestinians done to enrage Allah so much? Oh, they go, they haven't an answer. And the answer, Mark, lies within the Quran itself, which basically bestows, bequeaths and promises all the geography currently claimed by the Palestinians to none other than the Jewish people. And why, Mark, does it take me with very little influence to espouse these facts when so many other more eloquent, knowledgeable, pro-Israel commentators can do exactly the same but for whatever reason, Mark refused to do so. I can't believe it's lack of knowledge. I just don't believe that. Surely they've got the same knowledge and more so than I have. And yet, if I was in a debate on Question Time or something like that, I think the pro-Palestinians on the panel and the overwhelming pro-Palestinians in the audience would be aghast.
I
And
think
yet,
I think what you've just said is absolutely brilliant. And in fact, Peter, I think maybe we need to think about writing a book on this. I think I think I think I think we're onto something here. No, what you've just said is absolutely brilliant. But it's also that training, isn't it? It's actually saying to people, look at this fact, look at this. These are
absolutely.
brilliant arguments because they are facts to state at that time.
Absolutely. And Mark, just another couple of things, to my mind, so simple with just a little bit of research. I've written article after article about how no Palestinian land was stolen,
Mm,
and under immutable international law, both Gaza and Judea and Samaria, euphemistically coined the West Bank,
Bank
are within Israel's sovereign territory.
territory.
I've even had to correct some of the most high profile pro, or let's say anti Zionist members of the bar, KCs and QCs, in the knowledge that I've picked up just by research. Mark, I assure you, not one of them has been able to correct me. They've even come back and said, well, under international law, the United Nations, the ICJ and the ICC say that Israel is occupying Palestinian land. And I say, well, actually, the United Nations, under its charter, cannot change the immutable international law, which was laid down by the League of Nations and then validated by the UN Charter. And they come and they don't have an answer, Mark. They don't. They don't have an answer. Oh, well, in certain cases, the UN Security Council can change international law. It can't change international law. It can renew international law, but it can't amend what has already been previously laid down by the League of Nations. It cannot do that. And yet, Mark, we seem to be, our message gets lost in the ether, in the clouds. I don't know where, but I'm sure if we had the platform, I mean, I've got a social media platform which has a few thousand followers, hasn't got the millions of a Piers Morgan, but when I espouse those views, if I was to be corrected, I'd look at that correction and research it, because I'm not saying that I'm absolutely right, but no one has been able to challenge what I've just said to you in this conversation having with you today. They can't. And as soon as they can do, I'd be only too glad to listen and to do research and say, well, hold on a second, or say, yo, you know what, you're absolutely correct. But they haven't. So legally, historically, politically, I believe, religiously, I believe the cause that you and I are fighting for and challenging the false narrative is the right cause.
Absolutely, and you haven't. I mean, if you then talk to them about the San Remo conference, etc., and I know one of your areas of expertise, as you just brought it up, is this whole thing of the land, etc., and you have the receipts, and I'm fully aware, and I know that you do. And then when you talk about the Peel Commission. We talk about the awful pogrom in Hebron, I think, in 1929, etc. These events that are then moulding, but no, that is the land. But that's what we're dealing with in in international law, that is the attack. That's why when they put South Africa up to going to The Hague and all of this kind of thing, that's why it's just been absolutely appalling and disgusting. But I think Peter, I think we're onto something here. I think there is pamphlets or books to write to say, here is the argument, here is the truth, here is the knowledge that you need. But as you quite rightly raise, it's getting that out there to people that want to listen, because we also will accept that we are dealing. This is a spiritual battle. You know, this is needing. This is the biggest spiritual battle of our lifetime. And
Absolutely,
yeah,
100% correct.
yeah,
That's it.
and that's what we are dealing with, and we're dealing with then an age that does not want to respect faith, does not want to turn around and say, but there is no spiritual aspect to life at all in the way that we firmly
Mark,
believe.
Judeo-Christian values
Yeah,
have
yeah,
been diluted
mm,
by government after government after government, and more so, more so. Once we get back to respecting those Judeo-Christian values, then
mm.
I think will be the turning point. Will we ever? Mark, I'm not sure. Not the way this country is currently going.
I agree, and its trajectory is not good, but that doesn't mean, as I am trying to encourage you, and I know you are, that we don't speak out and we don't stand up for the truth, because that is what our role is. And I know at times it's extremely difficult and is extremely painful, but that's why we need to encourage each other. Peter, I just first of all just thank you for your time,
Mark, a
and
pleasure.
as we end, I just wanted to. Is there anything? Sorry, where can people find Blitz? Where can people find your work?
If they just Google Blitz and my
Yep,
name, a whole range of articles will come up. They can also follow me on Twitter if they so wish.
yep,
My
brilliant.
Twitter handle is at BAUM_P.
Brilliant.
So you can follow me in that, and or on Facebook. I've got a line. I don't tend to use Facebook as much these days. I tend to use Twitter and my articles in Blitz as being my main source. Also, Mark, before I go, one last thing. In the last few weeks, I've been a regular commentator on
Mm,
a major English-speaking Indian news channel called News Vision X. Sorry, News X Vision. News X Vision. And they are India, being I would say one of the more pro-Israel nations around, do give me the time. This particular news channel does give me the time of day to present the kind of narrative that I've been lucky enough to speak to you about today. So thank you for putting that out to your audience as well.
not at all. And I'll put the links below. But I've watched. You've been doing great interviews on that India channel, and keep up that good work, because I've caught one or two. But I'm also delighted that you've said, just finally, you've said a very powerful thing, which is, preaching to being able to have the opportunity to talk to other audiences, and not just the converted, and speaking truth. So I just want to encourage you to carry on. I'm going to play us out, Peter. I'll
Thanks,
say
Mark.
goodbye to you. I'll say
God bless
goodbye
you.
to you on the other side, but thank you so much, my friend.
God bless you, Mark.
Bless. Bye.